Joining us now is Reverend Al Sharpton, who delivered the eulogy at Tyre Nichols' funeral today. He is also, of course, the president of the National Action Network and host of Politics Nation right here on MSNBC. We also have the great Maya Wiley, civil rights attorney and president and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. Rev, Ms. Wiley, Maya, thank you for being here today. I'm sorry that our reunion has to happen under these circumstances. And Rev, we are also deeply grateful for everything that you did, not just for the Nichols family, but for the country today, and somehow bending time space to come back up to New York to do this show. What was it like in that room today?
There was clearly a lot of grief, but also anger, and also a determination that we have to stop this. And the way to stop it is by having federal law. Mm-hmm. You know, I grew up in the northern part of the King movement after Dr. King was killed. Jesse Jackson, who mentored me, and others, and the Reverend William Jones taught me, until you change legislation and make it a law, you can't really effectively change people's hearts. And I think we keep asking for policemen and others to redeem themselves until they know there's going to be accountability and change law, like I was taught. You're not going to stop this. They need to have qualified immunity off the table. Police feel that nothing's going to happen to me. Yeah. And if you had qualified immunity off the table, which is one of the key components of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, policemen can be leaving the home in the morning. Their wives will say, now you be careful because we could lose the house, we could lose the car. There's no skin in the game. So we're trying to do what we know will work, and that is changing the law. And yes, we won some cases recently. George Floyd, those cops in jail tonight. Right. Ahmaud Arbery, those people in jail tonight. So it's not just gaining political power, it's gaining change. But those are here and there. You need federal law that everyone would be held to the same standard.
I mean, I would also say there's something about wanting to incentivize people to be humane to each other, right? You talk about skin in the game. What's so sad about it is that the notion of the buy-in would have to happen punitively, right? Like, it's not that we can remind each other that we're in this together, that anti-blackness is a poison that spreads throughout the black community as it does the white communities and many other communities, and it needs to be solved. But that you'd have to incentivize people by saying, oh, the law is going to come and get you.
I do not believe those 5 black policemen would have done this to a white kid. The argument is, well, crime is up in many areas. And that is true, and we ought to fight crime, and we do. All of us do in all of our organizations. But the fact is, you know, on the white side of town, how to keep crime down without brutalizing and killing people. So use the same police force. It's not a different police department. On our side of town, what works there will work here if we are respected. And I think that what's so egregious about this is just 10 minutes away from where Dr. King was killed, fighting for city workers, and police are also city workers. You have 5 black cops who wouldn't have had a job if it wasn't for the Martin Luther Kings of the world beat a black man to death. I don't care what they come up with on social media is the reason. They beat a man to death who was unarmed and had not committed a crime.
I just, Maya, I can't get over that backdrop that the Rev so beautifully articulates, and what is happening in terms of the culture wars that are being perpetrated, I won't use any other word for it, in states like Florida, where you have a governor who is intent on erasing what to me feel like the gains of the civil rights era, the gains of the last 20 years, the cultural progress, the racial progress. I mean, how do you square the censorship that's happening in classrooms, the denial of history, the denial of conversation around the sins of the past and systemic oppression, and what we see here playing out on the street, which is evidence of systemic oppression, of systems that are flawed?
Because it's not a square, it's a circle. And that circle is exactly what the Rev is saying, which is we have a system of laws and principles that have not been equally applied. When we have achieved some measure of equality, of equal achievement, of getting some fairness, it's because we had to fight for it even when it's inscribed in law. I mean, the Voting Rights Act had to be passed in 1965, proud to lead the coalition that helped get that passed in combination with civil rights organizations across the country. But it was because, not because, and the Rev, you've said this on voting rights, there was always a constitutional right to vote. So just like policing, there was always supposed to be the laws of protection. It's how we apply them. And your point about humanity, how can we have humanity when we don't learn our history?
Yeah.
Because to your point, you know, part of what we just saw in the news today out of Florida was, you know, the College Board with a curriculum, an advanced placement curriculum on the first day of Black History Month,
yes,
on Black history. But what the link that DeSantis is trying to break, and that too many politicians pushing division, using race or sexual identity or any other number of things as a wedge between us, is to deny that our history is at all connected to the experiences we're having. So let's remember, what is historic today is not that Tyree Nichols is dead. That is common. What is historic is that anyone is paying any price for it. That's what's historic. That's right. It was historic when officers went down for murder for George Floyd's killing. That was historic. Being killed by police for driving while Black
is not historic.
Is not.
It's really, and I understand where you're coming from, and I understand how Memphis is being sort of held up. Ben Crump has said this should be a template. The sort of alacrity with which the system's moved to charge these officers, to fire these officers, to release the videotape, that should be a model for the nation for the next time a Black person is killed by police. It's the next time, the expectation that, oh yes, there will be another innocent Black person that's killed by police sometime in the near future, and we hope that law enforcement moves quickly to punish them. That's the part that I think is still so difficult to handle, you know, to swallow, to just abide the notion that this violence continues, but maybe the circumstances around it can be made better.
And we can't do it police department by police department or state by state. It must be federal law. That's why I said what I said, Reverend Jackson, Reverend Jones taught me. You've got to change the laws. We were raised in this. Her father was George Wiley, head of National Welfare Rights Organization. I was raised, as I said, in Operation Breadbasket. We were taught, drilled in this, because we don't get anything out of this other than to try to do what is right. And what is right is to change the law. Otherwise, 20 years from now, what do we have? A lot of marches that achieved nothing that fundamentally changed how society operates to protect its citizens. You need law to do that.
There was an important lawmaker at the funeral today, the Vice President of the United States. She herself emblematic of progress this country has made. You asked her to speak. It didn't seem like she came with prepared remarks.
She didn't.
What's your impression of how this death in particular is changing the White House focus on police reform?
I think that when she spoke and talked about how she was one of those in the Senate before she was vice president that authored the George Floyd law and pushed it forward, President Biden has said we need this law. Now we need the Senate. We need all of the Democrats and some well-meaning Republicans to say we can't keep being episodal and keep going from one death to the next. We need, the issue now is voting rights and police reform. That is the civil rights challenges of the 21st century. We must meet the challenge.
Do you think do you think we are in agreement on that, those of us who want to see change, that this is the civil rights battle of our era?
Yes. You can't be for civil rights and not see the importance of protecting our right to decide who leads us, protecting our right to be free from police violence. There's nothing more fundamental to our rights as residents and citizens of this country than to be able to do both those things, literally to choose leaders and live, and have anybody in a position of power to pay consequences for not paying attention to the same laws we all have to pay attention to. Now, I will also say, because the Rev is so right about this, it's not given, it's not ever given, it's demanded. change and laws are demanded. And when we see the laws are not equally applied, that's why we have to have new laws that says, we figured out how you found a loophole, now we're going to close it. And when we see any politician of any party who claims to be in favor of civil rights, but lies about whether or not there's voter fraud, or lies about whether or not closing poll sites in Black communities keeps Black people from being able to vote, or lies when you have police officers at polling sites and suggest that you are not making people afraid to go cast their ballot, when the very reality of the Black existence is that you're safer if you avoid the police. That is not a democracy. And saving it is exactly what the civil rights movement has always done, fought for democracy and saved it. And the truth is, it makes everybody safer, everybody stronger, everybody more empowered. And all I would say to anyone is any politician that seeks to divide us, that calls us names, that suggests that being woke is worse than being asleep, is not a politician fighting for democracy and for every single resident of this country.
I just hope that in 55 years, the people of Memphis do not need to eulogize another Black person with signs saying, I am a man. Reverend Al Sharpton, Maya Wiley, thank you both for being here tonight. I am deeply appreciative of your words of wisdom and the fights you fight for all of us.
Thank you, Alex.